I-Chung Lai, the president of the Taipei-based think tank Prospect Foundation, is the next guest of Spotlight Ukraine. Hello and nice to see you. How far will China go in its relationship with Russia?
I think to the Xi Jinping, the relationship with Putin stands a very special place in his heart. So it is impossible for China to really be away from Russia. And also, if you look at the last year, the Russia and China, the so-called no limit alliances, the kind of relationship that also presents that China will do whatever it can to help Russia, despite the Western countries they try to dissuade China from doing so. So we have to assume that the Russia-China, the alliances, that's going to continue irrespective of how the Russia did toward the Ukraine.
So our program is called Spotlight Ukraine, and we talk about the global news concerning the Ukrainian question. So what is China's role in mediating the war in Ukraine?
I do not think that China will, in a sense, that trying to mediate the war on Ukraine according to what the Ukrainian people's wishes. If you look at the Chinese plan about how to solve the so-called the crisis through the political means, the proposal itself did not look at the Ukraine its own view, and what China wanted about the peace is actually wanted Ukraine immediately to stop fighting and want Ukraine basically to acknowledge what has been lost right now in order to achieve the so-called ceasefire. And so that is the whole plan about China is planning on the so-called ceasefire of Ukraine.
Yeah, that's interesting, but Ukraine made their own proposal to get involved in peace formula realization. Meanwhile, China insists on standing on the right side of history. That's the quote by China's officials. So where is the right side and what does it mean?
China basically look at the history through the whoever is in power, whoever is stronger, and that the might make the correct. So that's how the China look in the history. And in this sense, first of all, China look at the China-Russia relation first. And so what they wanted is actually to have the ceasefire according to Russia's terms, not in Ukraine's terms. And second, China shared the understanding with Russia about how the war in Ukraine and the cost above it. Especially, China also accused the Western countries by using Ukraine to weaken Russia, rather than blaming the Russia as the aggressor against Ukraine that caused the war.
So, from this point of view, the stronger you are, the righter you are.
Yeah, that's exactly what China is thinking about, in my view.
Okay, but what China's leader wants from the weakening Putin these days?
Well, China has its own plan about its competition vis-a-vis the United States. So China is focusing basically on the eastern theaters, the possible war on Taiwan, the aggression against Japan, and also in the China tension with India in the China-India border. And so that in order to have a full competition and win against the United States, China really need a strong international partner backup for China. In a sense, China needs Russia. So China cannot allow Russia to go weak. And the current the weakening of Russia in the war in Ukraine, that is not in Chinese interest. So what China wanted to do is to preserve the Russia's strength. When China in its own competition vis-a-vis the United States, China will have Russia as its very important ally in its back.
But despite this, Putin was eagerly willing to forge the economic relations, especially in an energy sector. But we saw no progress in implementation of Power Siberia project to divert the risks from losing the EU market. So why was that? So the proposal was not so good for China?
The issue is that in order to implement those proposals, a lot of funding needs to be input into those projects. In China right now, if Russia is not putting those money into it, and China is not going to put those money into something that China believe it has, it did not have a great portion of their success. So China's basically is waiting for Russia to put in the money, and especially if since the year 2014, China already sealed a very advantageous liquid gas as well as other energy contract with Russia. So what China is waiting for Russia to also throw in its money in order to get this proposal to move forward. That's what China is doing. Of course, you could say that if China is eagerly wanting those energy, why China would not invest its own resources in order to get this proposal implemented? But the Chinese calculation is always that since those implementation involve a huge chunk of the infrastructure investment, and China basically is wanting Russia to also invest in those in order to get this implemented.
And will China get involved thoroughly into Russia's Ukraine war? Yes or no?
I believe that China is actually supporting Ukraine, supporting Russia in its war potential against Ukraine. And last year already, you see numerous evidence, although it's indirect, about how China is funneling the resources to support the Russia's war in Ukraine. Many of the what the Ukraine found out at the battlefield regarding the ammunitions or other materials that are coming from Chinese origin, China claimed that there is no governmental support. But you have to understand that many of the international trade, especially during the COVID, many of them, they had to be under the governmental sanction and the governmental approval. Otherwise, those things that just cannot move outwards. And so that I believe the Chinese government is actually supporting the war potential for the Russia to sustain its aggression against Ukraine.
Thank you. Thank you for your opinion. I-Chung Lai, the president of the Taipei-based think tank Prospect Foundation, was the guest of Spotlight Ukraine, and we were discussing the Chinese issue. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Latest news, trends, and analytics on all about Ukraine. Like, share, and subscribe. Any questions, proposals, and comments, contact us via email.